Before we begin today's video, I want you to pause it and go make yourself a cup of tea. Seriously. Oh wait, if you don't have any tea at home, go fill up a cup of water and pretend that you do. If you don't know how to make tea, then listen up. Get a cup, pour some water in it, heat that water up, put the tea bag in the water, stir it around a little bit, and boom, you got some tea. Have you made it yet? No? Seriously, go do it. It's gonna make the video that much better. That's hot. Now that we've got our literal cup of tea, let's talk about the figurative cup of tea that we're going to spill and talk about what the colonists did after the Boston Massacre. And how perfect is it that the mug I'm sipping out of is from Boston. Alrighty, so remember from yesterday's video, the level of fighting between the colonists and the British soldiers reached a whole new level when the soldiers fired upon the colonists in the streets of Boston in what we now call the Boston Massacre. And this was a really bad look for Great Britain. I mean, they already weren't liked because of the Townshend Act, the Stamp Act, and the Quartering Act, and now you've got this. So they had to do what we call damage control to kind of appease the anger of the colonists, and they did that with this very beverage that we're sipping on.
In response to the Boston Massacre, Parliament repealed all the taxes on the colonies, except the tax on tea. Although the colonists loved tea, many boycotted it because of the tax.
Here's the thing about us Americans, and really people in general, they'll boycott just about anything if they feel that strongly about it. The colonists were no different, and unlike present-day boycotting, the colonists' actions actually did have a major impact on some companies.
The largest British tea company, the British East India Company, lost a great deal of money. To save the company, Parliament passed the Tea Act in 1773. It said that only this company could sell tea to the colonies. With this tax, the British hoped to force the colonists to again buy British tea.
Really what's going on here is that Great Britain is scrambling to try and find a way to appease the colonies and still make money off of them. I don't know what you're thinking in the moment right now, but what I'm thinking is that Parliament is really just making things worse for themselves. They didn't see it that way though, and they really truly believed that passing the Tea Act of 1773 would fix their problems. And for a short time, they actually found success in this wild idea. But of course it didn't last. Observe.
The Tea Act did in fact lower the cost of tea. But the colonists were still angry because this was another unfair law passed without their approval. They were also angry that they were forced to buy tea from only one company. What if Parliament decided to let certain companies control other imported items?
The colonists were still angry with Parliament because, again, they were demonstrating this action of taxation without representation. And for a quick refresher of what that means, the colonists were angry that they didn't get to voice their own opinions before the Parliament shoved another rule in their face. And worse yet, the colonists hated the idea of only having to buy tea from just one company. Let's put it this way, it's like if you could only buy fruits and vegetables from Target, a big name store, instead of going and supporting your local fruit stand. And this is only one law that Parliament was passing, but the colonists started to panic. As we read, they were scared that Parliament might pass more acts similar to this one. Picture this panic like an iceberg. That's right, we're talking science in a history video. Icebergs, for those of you that don't know, are massive. But it doesn't really look that way on the surface. In fact, most of the iceberg is down on the bottom, and that has to do with density and buoyancy. But you know what? We're getting too sciencey right now, so let's get back to the historical analogy. So take a look at this graphic right here. Think of this top part as the Tea Act that Parliament passed. The colonists worried that this was the proverbial tip of the iceberg, and that Parliament would indeed pass way more acts that were similar to the Tea Act that would affect everything else that they bought. So to fight this fear, the colonists did exactly what they do whenever British government makes a bad decision.
Again, the colonists protested. Some spoke out while others boycotted tea. In Boston, some local citizens acted against the tax. On December 16, 1773, a group of men dressed as American Indians boarded ships in Boston Harbor. They opened 342 chests of tea and dumped the tea into the water.
This is a modern-day tea bag. You can buy these in packs of 20 to 100, and it costs, this one at least, $4. As you can see, they're not that big. This guy, though, is huge. This is straight up a brick of tea. Now, historically speaking, the tea that was dumped was not exactly in this form, but it's not unrealistic to think that these kind of tea bricks could have been on board. In general, history tells us that the tea on board was actually more closely related to this powder or leaf form that we know today. As we read, they dumped 342 crates into the harbor. That doesn't seem like a lot, but let's take a look at the numbers behind that number. In total, these 342 crates of tea added up to about 90,000 pounds of tea. That's equal to 45 tons. But what does that number mean? Think of it this way. Your average elephant weighs 5 tons. So, if we do the math here, that's about 9 elephants worth of tea that they just threw overboard into the Boston Harbor. And if you think that's crazy, the amount of money that tea was worth is insane as well. Remember, this 100-pack of tea only cost me $4. The value of the tea that was dumped that night in 1773? $1 million. Needless to say, if the colonists were dumping that much tea, a product that they loved, into the harbor, they were clearly upset. So let's sum up what happened here and finish reading the text.
Today, this incident is known as the Boston Tea Party. Soon, people began to sing about it in the colonies. "Rally Mohawks," an American tribe, they sang. "Bring out your axes and tell King George we'll pay no taxes on his foreign tea." But in Great Britain, people were shocked and angry, and King George was furious with the colonists.
This act became one of the first acts of defiance against Parliament, and all of the colonists started rallying behind it. On the other hand, we read that Great Britain and the king were not too happy about it at all. In fact, they were so upset with what the colonists did that they came down even harder on them. But we'll save that topic for tomorrow's video. In the meantime, let's see how the Boston Tea Party would compare to our modern day example we've been working through in our textbooks. After punishing your class for arguing with the yard duties, the principal is now making a rule that your class can only buy a certain kind of drink. Obviously, the juice represents the tea in this example, and so in 1770s it translates to: the colonists are upset at being forced to purchase tea from only the British East India Company. So in a pretty realistic turn of events, the students just throw the juice away because they're unhappy about it. In historical terms, this would be that the colonists dumped the tea into the Boston Harbor. It's good tea. Minty. Guys, that's going to do it for today's Daily Dose of History. Head back over to our Google Classroom and answer the question of the day, and be sure to get these notes copied down because our review session on Thursday is going to talk all about what we've been learning. And tomorrow is our last video for Chapter 10, so be sure to tune into that. You're not going to want to miss it. So until then, I will see you right here tomorrow.